G'day, welcome to Market Sam After Work. Today I want to go over this rifle of Sam's, which is one that we're going to be using in the upcoming or off season, so in the shorter range stuff, the 1,000 yards and around that neck of the woods. Shorter range for us, I get that might be long for some, but that is for as sort of our close stuff. And this is for Sam to do a bit of playing with, so she gets down behind this one. We'll both use this one here, but this is specifically designed to try and work as well as it can for Sam. Now, this we introduced it before. We showed it off just as we bought it, so out of the box. Out of the box, it was a 223 with a 20-inch barrel. This little barrel here that was okay, still got decent speed out of the 223 rounds, shot very well, but it wasn't quite where I wanted to end up. What I wanted to end up with was something, and I suppose I'll go through the parameters of what I'm trying to set here for Sam as a rifle, and I suppose this sort of thing is going to suit a lot of people also. And the reasons why I chose this. To start off with, she's various rifles that Sam's got behind and shot. There's some good ones. We've done a 22-250 recently, which is a great one she'll do to work with as well. But there's probably her favourite rifle prior to this, and the one that was specifically hers for a long time, was a 223 in a Seiko 85. Now, very accurate little rifle, nice heavy barrel. We put it in a GRS stock, this is many years ago, and did a bit of tweaking here, there and all over the place. And it worked well, but it had some fundamental problems. For those that know about Seiko 85s in that sort of range, the way their ejection systems are not great. With the sort of how you set up your scope, with how it ejects, with how the brass in the secondary part of the injection, or how it actually throws the brass free of the rifle, is a reasonable deal in the way it doesn't do it very well. So you're forever sort of picking brass out of that little fella. And as much as a lovely smooth action, they shoot really nicely and that sort of stuff, they're also set up with a fairly short magazine and no easy way to get the round set up to close to the lands and being able to use the magazine for it. So it's got some fundamental flaws in usability. Great rifle, and for the people who love their Seikos, don't want to pick on that side of it, but there was a couple little flaws for how we wanted to use it. So the next bit of the equation is that Sam, being short in comparison to me, she's 5'1.5" and I'm sort of 6'3", means that there's quite a difference in how I suppose the functionality of trying to use a rifle, especially in a prone position. Where I find I'm very able to move around, I always have strength and leverage to be able to manipulate bolts, putting rounds in, sorting out rounds, picking up from, putting them in the magazine, all that sort of stuff. So single feeding, general functionality around rifle is very simple for me. A little bit made because I'm taller. Sam's a little bit in the opposite category. Because she's a bit shorter, means that she's quite commonly having to go right forward, and even functioning the bolt, having to lift her arm right off the, so her elbow's not on the ground, so she doesn't have any leverage. Which means that when you're reaching right out and trying to function things, you then have a lot less strength involved. It doesn't matter the strength of your arm, your mechanical strength of not having that elbow leverage point is quite weakened. And the other detail would be when it comes to putting in brass and that sort of stuff, if you're reaching a long way forward, because she's short in comparison, even when a rifle's set up to her, there still is a fair bit between her and the scope and that sort of stuff for her arms to get around. So what all this conversation moves into is that where Sam shoots very accurately, like a lot of girls, and Sam does a lot of practice also, she's very accurate, but we find on the long range precision stuff, not extreme long range, that's not her forte, but in the long range stuff, 1,000 yards, 600 yards, 1,200 yards, that sort of stuff, even out to a mile. When it's single feeding, it takes her a fair bit longer to settle down on the rifle. And that's because there's so much moving between each shot. So for me, that's quite simple. I'm not having to move much. I'm very comfortable. I'm very practiced at it as well. But for Sam, it's much more of something that she wants to, well, I suppose that the end of that conversation moves into magazine feed. Although I'm not a huge fan of it, it very much suits how Sam shoots. So having a magazine or a couple of them, being able to put 10 rounds in and then shoot and then settle and just rack the bolt and back onto it, shoot, is a real help in the way of getting Sam onto target faster and getting more comfortable. She's much more comfortable shooting out of a magazine. And that isn't because she's a girl, that isn't because of any other thing than it's the length of her frame in comparison to the average rifle setup. And you could probably do a little bit more with really shrinking it up. We tend to both shoot on both of us shoot on the rifles, but it's really, even when it's set up properly, it's still a little bit out of a reach. It's just the percentage difference in arm lengths and that sort of stuff makes a difference. So I think there's a lot of people who are, whether you're male, female or otherwise, that have the same sort of issue. The magazine really works for you guys. So that's the ingredient that I wanted to try and achieve. So out of that, we've also shot a couple of times the TIKKA TAC A1, which is what this rifle was, and Sam was very comfortable shooting it. So in a very well set up form, with a magazine set up, with everything working properly, this rifle came into where it was going to do the trick. So that's why we bought this rifle. But there was another couple of details in it. There's a lot of people who like this rifle. There's some nice bits and pieces you can do to them, so I wanted to show people what you can do to them quite simply. And there's also, I wanted to do, well, what you see in the front here is a carbon barrel. I wanted to use a carbon barrel. This is a carbon 6 barrel, and I wanted to use one and put some runs on the board and actually put some time into using it. It's not something I commonly use, not really suited to my ELR stuff, in the big stuff and even the middle stuff. I don't mind the extra weight, but in building a rifle for Sam that was going to be good for everything, so not so much the hunting, but more the playing, whether it's tripod or bipod or prone or bench or whatever it is, just be able to generally use it. This I thought was going to be a pretty good platform to do that in. Magazine's nice and long, it's already set up, bolt, all that sort of bits and pieces, worked pretty nicely and was going to be a nice rifle to get to that place. So listen, that's the logic. That's why this rifle is for Sam. That's what we're actually up to, and so let me show you what we've done with it. As you can see, the 20-inch barrel came out, which is the 223, and I had to pick a round of what it's going to go with. I had some choices, and I was a little bit pushed into place by what I could find in the way of a barrel that I could get that I wanted to show off a little bit, so I could get it with at a good price, so I could show it off type things as well. So I suppose there's a little bit of promotion attached to that. But it was also a really good round, a smart round that would give all the things I wanted. Not too heavy recoil, good on energy, make all those bits and pieces work, be able to run it at full length from the magazine and that sort of stuff. And over here is what I came up with. Very much a target shooter's round. I haven't seen too much of them on the job of doing other than just bench rest shooting, but this is the 6mm BR. So it's a round that's going to run in the magazine without any fast, fit in there easily. I've set it up with a 109 grain Berger projectile. We've done some basic load testing. I've done my normal thing. I'll put an image on there of where I went through 5 different powder loads and just shot them to see pressures and see how it ran. I actually don't commonly do this, but I actually ran them across the chronograph. So this is running it in at the same time, so breaking it in, just putting a mop through between shots. But these are the shots, and this is what we started at lower pressure, went and got to, I don't share powder loads, but we're over 30 grains of powder, and we're not running too much pressure in our top one there, so we're going to start off our load like that, and that's running just over 2,900 feet per second. So very good speed for a 109 grain projectile. Looking forward to things working really well. So that's the round, a little short, as the target shooters or the guys from that world would say, short and fat is where it's at. But that's the round we're using, which should do all those things really well. I've already checked, it feeds really nicely. It runs in the magazine nicely, it single fingers nicely, it really does everything we want it to do. So I suspect by the time everything settles in, we're probably going to be in the mid 2900s, when it's 2910 or it's 2950, it's going to be somewhere around there out of a 109 grain bullet. And we'll see, that's only the first run, but that looked like it was going to be a nice place, nice and working well. Okay, so that's speed, by the way. This is a 24.5 inch carbon 6 barrel, so 24.5 inch. We're running this is a 1 and 8 twist. It's got one of my muzzle brakes on it, Brett over at Thompson's Gunsmithing is the one who did the gunsmithing for us, so he did the chambering for us, set it up for us. There's a couple of things we had to do. This was a 223, so what you have to do to take a 223 to something like this, which is a 308 bolt pattern or bolt face, so same for a 6.5 Creedmoor or a 260 Remington or a 308 or a 243 or all those bits and pieces. The difference is in this bit here. Needed to get another bolt for it. That was a little complicated to do, but actually the way I did this is I have one we set up a rifle we did with a 260 a couple of years ago, and I haven't wrecked that rifle at all. That's still together as a rifle. I stole its bolt, and so this has been done without messing with the bolt. This one has been set up so it's running the same bolt. It was nice, it's true, all that sort of stuff. We checked it, so it's good. So this can go into the 260. It also runs in this one here. So the only drawback I have with that is that if I tried to shoot the two rifles alongside each other, we'd be swapping the bolt backwards and forwards. Not what we're planning on doing, but that's what I did to get around that. In places when you can buy a new bolt body, which is all you actually need, then okay, to do that. I did find one, but it was worth as much as a rifle, so I just went through a process of pulling another one apart to put it back together. But that's the mod I did there. The magazine, I simply got some 308 magazines and they fit nicely. So I got a couple of 308 magazines, which means that's going to suit Sam very well. She can have then 2 magazines ready, go away. She's got 10 rounds and she's got another 10 rounds that she can do before she has to stop and reload the magazines. So nice on that score. There's obviously the carbon barrels in there, the muzzle brakes on there, that's all done. Everything's then set up properly and that sort of stuff. There's obviously a pull apart and put back together at that place. You're seeing it at the moment in one of the formats with one of my universal bag riders on the back of it. That just clips on. That's just that you can buy them on my store. That's a universal bag rider with a quick release. This will be for for the other sort of shooting, then it doesn't need to run the bag rider on it. When it is in this form of shooting, then yeah, we can simply put the bag rider on the back of it. So nice and simple in that format. Up the front here is probably a novel piece or a bit. It's got my bipod system on it. It's something that I had to test to try and do this, but yes, this is possible. I have simply cut off the front of this rail. This is all sort of one piece of aluminium. I cut off that rail to where I wanted it. I then machined down the outside of the octagonal forend. So I chopped it off. I put it in the lathe, which means simply undoing these bolts here and taking that forend off the rifle. Take the muzzle brake off, take the forend off. Chop those bits and pieces, do a bit with the hacksaw, a bit with the drop saw, a bit with then in the lathe, take it down, and then machined out the spigots that we sell, which is the component B, to where that could sit on the front there, and I made it so that it's an interference fit, and then use some Loctite, some green Loctite, to basically cool this down, heat that up, put the Loctite on there, push it on there and let it set. So then that's how it's held there and that'll stay there nicely. So it just ends up with a spigot on the front of this, which suits my bipod, and then my bipod system's on there. The one bit I haven't done to this rifle as yet, well I should say the only other thing I've done to the rifle at this stage is adjust the trigger, get it down to 1.25 pounds. So that's where it's set up. So that's really nice. All that's working really nicely and doing what it's supposed to do. The other bit I will have to do to make this work, as for using everything, is put a rail on here, and I'll work out whether it's an Arca rail or a Picatinny rail, but to be able to run on a tripod, because this is really nicely set up for some tripod shooting. You'll notice with our bipod system, this also works nicely for bag shooting and that side of things. You've got a nice clean run on the bottom there, so really nice, tucks away nicely. I really like the way these work on this sort of format, all tucked away and neat and tidy. But that's that process. Let me put those legs back out. And yes, for the people that ask, yes, these things do twist side to side. So you do have rotation for cant, but the way you set them up is that they're tight enough to where you can then function the bolt quite hard and you're not getting any movement. You want to rotate on to set your bubble level, then you set it up on properly there. At the moment, I've got this little NX8 scope on the top of it. This one here is the 4-32 in the second focal plane, and I've got it sitting in the air attack base. which means that I can run it up to this, I think it's a 40 MOA rail. With this sort of stuff, I can get to around the 130 minutes of elevation for if we want to stretch it out to 2,000 yards or more is how far we could go. And this rifle, I will have to do that. I will have to stretch it out to see where we go to, whether it's with this, I've got the rail on the front, so I can run the Night Force wedge. You could run the Charlie Tarak on the front of it, or we can put on the March scope, which bolts on top here. This scope I use on multiple things. For those who don't realise, I use these AeroTac bases, which have the adjustment cam here, which adjusts from 0 to 10 to 20 to 30 up to 70 MOA in the way of rolling the scope forward to cant, to be able to get extra elevation or just being able to get your full use. So getting to where you have it set up at roughly half the internal adjustment. And there's videos on to explain all that, but I use it for that reason. But the other reason I use it is it's a very good lock-up mono set of rings, so a set of rings and base, which clamps on very simply with just a couple of 7/16 bolts on the side here. So it means I pull these on and off all the time. Scopes rarely live on rifles for any length of time. They are out for a shoot. I largely am running them in a bore-sighted fashion, but if we want to do more than that, then we'll zero them on the day and off we go. But that's so they are very flexible. It also very much looks after the scope because it is a mono set of rings sitting on there which are holding the scope, protecting the scope, and the unbolting and bolting is happening on the second piece down the bottom here, which goes onto the rail. So listen, that's the look at this. As you can see, a box of ammo set up. For those people who want to know, yes, I've run from the standard 6mm BR ream. Yes, I've run the free bore forward. We've throated it further forward. Specific numbers, I didn't bother with measuring specific numbers. I go to where it suits my round. I get the round, I work out where I want to sit the bullet, and then I measure the overall length as to what I wanted. These are just under 62mm in overall length. And then I make that work by moving the lands forward to suit that. Simple as that process. That gives me, and now with the powder I've got in there, I'm not compressed, but I'm at the place where I've got a full case of powder. We're running Lapua brass, we're running the Federal small primers. At this stage they've got small primer holes, I've left them at that place. I'll do some messing and testing around with taking them out or leaving them small. But at the 2900 is where we've started, and like I said, probably going to end up pretty close to 2950 in a 109 grain projectile with a nice sort of look in the way of the pressure, the way it's running, nice case fill, all that type of thing. I'm expecting really good things. But I suppose that's what I want to tell you. It's still, by the way, these two bits and pieces, the barrel and the bolt, all able to go back together, and it still would be a fully functioning 223. Which performed very well, by the way. It was just a little bit light in the barrel, and I really wanted something that just had a little more energy for going a little further, setting up in something that is, well, I suppose exactly the sort of thing that Sam really likes. It's low on recoil impulse. It's still got really good energy. It's going to feed nicely out of the magazine. Couple of magazines so you can go through and plink away, and like I said, once it's set up on the rail on the front here, whether that's tripod shooting or it's bipod prone shooting or it's used on a bench or whatever it is, this will be a great little combination, and really with this sort of scope set up even could be a good little hunter. Anyway, that's what I'm going to tell you. Like I said, I should finish with the carbon 6 barrel. I've used them a couple of times. I haven't had them much on the channel with carbon fiber barrels, and that's a little bit of what I wanted to do here. This is a nice place to do it. It turns it into, this gun is now of moderate weight. It's lost some weight by going away from the 20-inch barrel to a nearly 25-inch barrel in the carbon fiber. So it's nice on its weight structure. It's still not a super light hunter by any means, but it's not heavy rifle either. So it's good on that sort of score. I'll put the weight on what it weighs. But I really look forward to running some numbers through it and run a fair few rounds and the heat things and all the questions people have. I look forward to being able to say, listen, having some more experience to it. Carbon 6, from all I've seen and from the local importer in Australia, they've seen very good results from, expecting very good things, good barrel, well finished barrel, nice to machine, everything worked just like it was supposed to, nice and straight. So looking forward to good things. But anyway, that's for later in the year. I can tell you more about that. And like I said, this is really more the wet season stuff, where we're shooting at the roads the driveways. We don't shoot at roads, at the driveways when we've got all the green around the place. So more of that sort of thing, and whether it's the 600 yards or 1,000 yards or 1,200 yards or even stretching out to the mile sort of stuff. Really looking forward to putting some runs on the board with this one. But anyway, guys, I suppose that's about what I can tell you. Leave any comments or thoughts you've got below, and thanks for checking in, and we'll catch you next time.